It is July 28th, 1794. Maximilian Robespierre, the architect of the Reign of Terror, who ordered the execution of thousands of French citizens, has become the final victim of his own regime. In 1774, Louis XVI was crowned King of France. His reign was plagued by problems. A population boom caused much starvation and hardship. The purposeful starvation of the commoners by the monarchy did nothing to ease the commoners' problems. Radical wealth differences between the church and nobles to the common people caused much jealousy and envy. The majority of the people of France were very unhappy. Philosophy by Voltaire and other Enlightenment philosophers gave a roadmap for new democratic ideas. France's loss in the 7 Years' War caused much poverty and loss of territory. Although Britain lost the same amount in the war, France's archaic economic system could not fare as well. Louis XVI's support of the American Revolution also drained the coffers of the French. To gain money, the monarchy taxed the poor significantly more than the rich. In 1783, a volcano named Laki erupted, causing a frost, killing many crops and initiating a famine. Since the Middle Ages, France had organized into a seigneurial system, where lords ruled over peasants in a class system. Also, France had divided itself into 3 estates: those who prayed, those who fought, and everyone else. The first estate was the clergy, which consisted of only 1% of the population of France, but owned 10% of the land and collected their own taxes, while paying a small amount to the state. The second estate were the nobles, who lived on land inherited from their ancestors. They consisted of 2% of the population, but owned 25% of the land. In medieval times, they were the knights who fought, but by 1789, they transitioned to luxurious palaces. The third estate was everybody else, ranging from middle-class artisans to the very poor sans-culottes. They were 97% of the population, while having very few rights and were taxed more than the other 2 estates.
What is the third estate? Everything. What has it been heretofore in the political order? Nothing. What does it demand? To be something therein. ABCs.
Ever since the Estates General, a meeting of the 3 estates to decide issues, the king had mostly been in control. However, at the Estates General of 1789, numerous calls for more power to the Estates General were made. The third estate tried to merge the estates together into one unified assembly, but failed. The third estate then left, declaring themselves the National Assembly. When the new assembly decided to convene in a meeting hall, the king shut the hall down, so the assembly met in an indoor tennis court instead. On June 20th, 1789, the Assembly made the famous Tennis Court Oath, an oath to never adjourn until a new constitution was written. This was truly the beginning of the end for the French monarch.
No dictator, no invader can hold an imprisoned population by force of arms forever. There is no greater power in the universe than the need for freedom. Against that power, governments and tyrants and armies cannot stand. J. Michael Straczynski.
The Assembly's actions had shown one thing: the people had had enough. On July 14, 1789, a large, very angry group of civilians in the newly formed French National Guard attacked the Bastille, an infamous government prison. After some civilians crossed over the drawbridge, the guards of the prison fired artillery into the crowd. The guards then fired at the town. Eventually, more civilians joined the fight, and a huge mass of men, women, and even children joined the fight and took the prison. After they took over the prison, the people's rage could not be delayed until trial. The Parisian governor residing in the prison was beheaded and his head mounted on a pole.
Any law which violates the inalienable rights of man is essentially unjust and tyrannical. It is not a law at all. Maximilian Robespierre.
With the storming of the Bastille fresh in their minds, the politicians of the Assembly wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Similar to the Declaration of Independence, the document clearly wrote out what the inalienable rights of all men were, not giving preferential treatment to anyone, not the nobles, not the clergy, not even the king. The king had grown to hate this so-called revolution and planned to escape to Montmedy, a royalist stronghold. He and his family dressed as servants and took a carriage to the town. Unfortunately for the king, when he was near Montmedy, in the town of Varennes, a postmaster recognized him and revealed him to the guards. The royal family was then sent back to Paris. After this experience, the king grew increasingly tired and let his queen make all the decisions, while the people's opinion of him plummeted. After the king's excursion to Varennes, anti-monarchy sentiment was at a fever pitch. Just a few months after the royal family's flight, a massive mob assaulted the Tuileries Palace, the king's residence in Paris. The mob had assembled, believing that the royal family was giving intelligence to Austria and Prussia, France's enemies. The king had only narrowly escaped, while the mob slaughtered everyone inside. After the mob learned of the royal family escaping to the assembly building, they marched there and arrested the royal family, abruptly ending 952 years of French monarchy. In the midst of chaos, a new political party was gaining power, the Jacobins. They opposed the power of the king and wanted a full republic. In 1792, a split occurred, and a radical wing of the party, supporting universal suffrage, separation of church and state amongst others, split off and were led by a politician named Maximilien Robespierre. After the fall of the Girondists, the moderates, the Jacobins took control and initiated a slaughter of massive proportions, the Reign of Terror. King Louis was put on trial for treason in 1792. The verdict was guilty. The Girondists wanted to spare his life, but the bloodthirsty Jacobins wanted his head. Unfortunately for the king, the Jacobins outnumbered the Girondists. On the 21st of January, 1793, King Louis was executed by guillotine, a device that beheads, in front of a large crowd of cheering people. The French monarchy was dead. The death of King Louis triggered the horrific purge of counter-revolutionaries, called the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror was designed by Robespierre and the Jacobins to stop a counter-revolution by executing people that spoke against the revolution. A man could be sent to the guillotine with his family just by saying something minorly critical against the revolution. Marie Antoinette, wife of King Louis, was the first victim. Many people celebrated her death, but many of them would soon become victims themselves. The Reign of Terror would claim 30,000 lives in France. Even after the excessive violence of the Reign of Terror, Robespierre wanted a new purge, and even produced a list of traitors, but refused to tell anyone the people on the list. Many people, afraid they were on the list and tired of the Reign of Terror, arrested Robespierre and sent him to the guillotine. The terror had ended as swiftly as it had begun. After Robespierre, a new government, the Directory, rose to power. The terror had ended, but France was still fighting against most of Europe. A famed general, Napoleon Bonaparte, staged a coup and formed a military dictatorship. The people grew to appreciate the glory of the new emperor, and a new era of European politics was born. Long after the French Revolution of 1789 had ended, it lived on in rebellious groups throughout the world. Its ideals of democracy, the people's power, and inalienable rights lived on when other civilians decided to overthrow their monarchy. There had been other revolutions, but the revolution where the most powerful monarchy in the world toppled to the might of its own subjects inspires us to this day. This revolution shows that thousands have more rights than one man. From the 1790s to this current day, the French Revolution lives on in all revolutionaries who seek to make their world just a little bit better.
The French Revolution taught us the rights of man. Thomas Sankara.